Okay, so usually we have somebody on to talk about their research, but today is a little bit different. Today is a little bit special. So I'm going to be talking to Inge Alferink about the OASIS database. And Inge is the project manager of the OASIS database. And so thank you very much for joining me today.
Thank you for having me. It's lovely to talk about OASIS.
Okay, so just if for people who don't know, what is the OASIS database?
Okay, the OASIS database is a database of research summaries, and specifically research summaries in the fields of language learning, language teaching, and multilingualism. Our summaries are a single page, so one page of A4 or US letter, we accept both. And they're written in sort of non-technical language. So we try to avoid jargon on technical terms, or if we do need them, we try to explain them. Summaries are all publicly available, so free at the point of access on our website. And I'm sure we can add a link to the website in the notes, maybe.
Yep, definitely.
Yeah, that'd be great. So each summary will tell you a little bit about what the study was about. So what was the question and why should we care? What the researchers did. So who were the participants? What language were they learning? What language were they speaking? Which country was it in? What was the sort of design, the setup? Just so you understand exactly what was done. A little section about the findings, what they found, what the main kind of points to take away. And then we've got a little section at the bottom, which we call things to consider, which is basically, okay, anything else that might be relevant, limitations, like this works for German, but would it work for Japanese if we don't know? Or future study, future directions, or particular takeaway points. That's basically what the summary looks like. And then we also always have a link to the original article. But so if people are interested and want to know more, they can go and click on that. But of course, that is if they have access to it, which is one of the main problems, but I'm sure we'll come back to that in a bit as well. So we collaborate with a number of journals, for example, Language Learning, TESOL Quarterly, Studies in Second Language Acquisition, Language Teaching Research, and the Monolanguage Journal. So they are asking all their authors of new papers to write a summary for us, and they will go up on our database. So we kind of have a steady stream of kind of new stuff coming on and recent stuff coming on as well. So we've got some other journals that we collaborate with, but these are the ones who are asking like every single person to do this. So that's quite great for us. So we now have, what do we think, 658 summaries, and we're adding new ones every week. So it's worth coming to have a look at it. Yeah, so that's basically what it is.
I was going to ask actually, because I remember seeing a poster from 2019. I think you said there were 250 summaries.
Yeah, but
now there are 600.
So yeah, 650, and yeah, it's the graph that's going up.
So some of these journals that you mentioned, if I'm understanding you right, in order to get published in these journals, part of the deal or part of the package is that there must be a summary. And just on that point, some of the summaries are written by the authors, but they're not necessarily written by the authors, or is that not the case anymore?
Okay, so we have, I think, 3 sources of summaries. So one are the summaries from the journals, which are typically written by the original author of the paper. Sometimes they get their grad students to do it, but it's a good exercise, or they do it together with their grad students. But mostly the original authors write them themselves, and then they go through either the editorial office of the journal, who will edit the summary, or through us. It depends a bit on which journal. So that's one. And then another source is we've got quite a lot of students who send in summaries. So there's quite a few graduate projects who are doing this as part of their coursework, course assessment. It's like, okay, this has been a course on second language vocabulary. Now write an OASIS summary. and they can submit it to us as well. We do ask that the course instructor kind of edits it or looks at it, and that they ask the original authors also to look at it and kind of approve or make edits. And then it comes to us and we'll look at it as well. So that's another kind of way we get summaries. And then there are some that are written by us, basically. So we initially had a bunch of money to kind of write 200-300 summaries. And so to kind of basically get a critical mass going, so it would be useful for people to come and look on the website. So but that's mostly kind of the startup of the project. Most of the summaries now come from the authors themselves. And authors can also, even if journals are not collaborating with us, authors can send them in as long as it's relevant for language learning and teaching and multilingualism. And there's some other criteria you can find on the website under the help page, but we're not limited to the collaborating journals. You know, we're open to others as well.
So you can just kind of send, if you've had a paper published, you can just send something uninvited in, or
yes, you can. I mean, we do ask that you go and look on the website because we've got templates to use and some guidelines, and we do ask that the papers are published in journals that are indexed on the Social Science Citation Index or the Arts and Humanities Citation Index. So this is sort of external quality control process for us. So there are some criteria, but but basically, yes, it's and we'd like that, right? It's nice. It's because we want to, we want this to be part of people's process as a kind of, you publish a paper and then you also make an accessible summary. It should be sort of part of a mindset almost.
Yeah, I'm thinking about whether to send a summary of one of my papers.
Yes, of course, do it.
Okay.
And then you can just send it to the email address. But everything's on the website. Under the help tab, there's kind of subsections for different types of people, like students and writers, and so you can find everything there.
Okay, great. So then the next question is why? Why do we need OASIS? What's the point, and kind of who is it for? Yeah,
that's a big one, isn't it? So Emma Marsden, who is the project director of OASIS, and Marsden Kasprowicz did a study, and they looked at both publications geared towards language professionals, so publications by professional organizations like language magazines and things like that, and they also looked at teachers and their general opinions about research. So they found that in kind of professional publications, there wasn't actually that many references to research studies. So that was one side of it. So you don't really get access through that medium much. And then they also looked at asked teachers, how do you view research? Are you interested in it? What's your kind of general opinion? And then also, how much access do you have to research and how much do you use it? And they found that teachers overall, kind of by and large, were very positive towards research and research findings and finding out new things and learning, but that they actually didn't have direct contact with research very much at all.
Yeah.
And others have found similar things. So this is not an isolated study. Others have found similar things. It's just
lack of access, either usually lack of access, either physical access or like kind of a technical access. They can't.
Yeah. So they also asked people, well, why? Do you have any particular reasons? And the main one was, well, time is a big one.
Yeah.
Just, you have a busy job at the end of the day, you might be interested, but are you really going to go into kind of a massive paper and do that? Maybe not. And then the other one is access, and that's both physical access. So a lot of journals are just behind paywalls, and it's really expensive. And so unless you have institutional access, like a university library that has access to lots of that, you can't really access it. And it's kind of interesting, in our newsletter this month, we've got 4 papers that are open access, which is great. And that open access is gaining some traction, and more papers are open access, but it's still we've got 4 open access papers this month versus like 25 that are not open access, right? So it's gaining traction, but the balance is still way off in a way. So people just don't have access to this. And then there's also sort of conceptual access, which is more about research papers can be really complicated. They're long, statistical analysis can be really complicated. There's more and more technical terms and jargon. And actually there's a paper showing this, that over the last few decades, the complexity of academic papers has increased, and they're just more and more difficult to read. So those 2 reasons, or those 2, 3, 5, I don't know how many we're up to, but those are the reasons that it is really kind of necessary. It's all about access. And then kind of there's been a paper recently about plain summaries in psychology.
Okay.
And they found that actually they work. People understand more from a plain language summary versus an abstract. And also they trust it more than an abstract, because presumably because they understand it better, and kind of so there's some evidence that it works as well. So that's great.
Is the 1-page limit a way of kind of dealing with that problem of time that you mentioned?
Yes. So the way we're trying to address all 3 of these things is time is just a page, and it's also a practical thing, right? If we say everything has to be a page, that's a very straightforward guideline. So if we say, well, 600 words plus or minus 10%, like it's sort of a gliding scale, like, oh yeah, well, we'll just put in this extra sentence, we'll just put in this extra thing. And if we just keep it to a page, straightforward. And so yeah, we want it to be short, long enough to have meaningful information, right, short enough so you can kind of read through it in 10 minutes. So yeah.
And do you know perhaps like how teachers are responding to it? Do you know like how many people are accessing these summaries, and if they are being looked at by teachers, or is it too early to kind of say? Yeah.
Well, I think we've now existed for, I guess, 2018, and it took some time to get started. So I think we've been, the last 2 years or something, we've kind of really been up and running. So it has just been mostly a phase of establishment, I think.
Right.
But we do have some numbers. So we've got about 20,000 downloads, I think. I want to say 20,000. And I've looked at the breakdown kind of through, because we ask people when they download a summary, we ask them, oh, what's your role? Partly for funness as well, so we can show that we're being used in the way they're supposed to be used. And I'd say about 35% of our audience is language teachers, and about 10% are teacher educators, 10% are policymakers. So we're kind of getting a good spread there. And then also some students and some academics, of course, it makes sense. I mean, people share their summaries with their colleagues, and yeah, so yeah, we get a good spread there. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's a really great idea, and I've used it myself for writing things, especially if you read a paper and you think, like, as you said, the complex statistical findings, or you read it and you're a bit kind of, you're scratching your head a little bit, you can go to the OASIS database. That's what it means. But are there kind of limitations to this when you kind of reduce? I mean, giving researchers the benefit of the doubt that their papers are necessarily complex because they are trying to express very complex ideas, not just for fun. So if you reduce these ideas down to 1 page, is something being lost?
Of course. Otherwise, everybody would just be publishing 1-page papers. No, I mean, that's
yeah,
productionist. But no, of course, that's lost, right? But some new ones will be lost. some nuance will be lost, some detail will be lost, and some detail that you don't need to know about necessarily to kind of appreciate the main findings. But yeah, there will always be something that's lost. And some people have flagged this as finding, as being worried about that, researchers mostly. But at the same time, I also think that if you have a one-page summary, anybody's going to realize that this is not the entire story in all of its excruciating detail. But it's, or delicious detail, depending on how you look at it. But yeah, so and so yes, of course something is lost, but that's not the point. The point is to get like the main idea across with some context as well.
Right. And also I noticed that very usefully they have both the reference for the original paper in, I think, APA, and the reference for the summary ready made on the document that you can just copy and paste.
Yes, well, it's a tricky thing, because of course you want people to, who are going to cite things, to really read the original paper. And I think most people will as well, especially academics, they will read the original paper. But it is a document, the summary is a separate document written by different authors and exists. So I think that's the, so that's why that's there.
Okay.
And we're all about transparency. We're all about kind of showing where things come from and showing how to cite it. And our summaries are also Creative Commons, so they can be reproduced and adapted for non-commercial purposes and elsewhere, as long as they're attributed properly. So that's also why it's right there. It's
that's brilliant. Yeah, anything Creative Commons is just a godsend, really, when you're trying to write materials.
Yeah.
So, and this question I'm not so sure about, but I've noticed that OASIS seems to be part of, or in some way connected to, is it IRIS or IRI?
I'd call it IRIS, but yeah.
And so what is that, and what's the connection between IRIS and OASIS?
Okay, so IRIS is a repository for research materials and research data, especially again in the field of language learning and language teaching. So I think they're a little bit like siblings. So they're related by people. So Emma Marsden is the kind of, I want to say instigator, but I think initiator is probably the best word, and sort of driving force behind both of those projects. And NSELP as well, which is the National Centre for Excellence in Language Pedagogy in the UK here. So they're kind of, that's another project also. So connected by people, we have some project members who are both on, initial project members who are both on OASIS and on IRIS. But I think really they're sort of connected by ideas, by the idea of access and openness, and in IRIS case, I think also reproducibility as well. So OASIS is about access to stuff that's behind paywalls and to content, like actual content of papers, and IRIS is more about access to research materials. So it's got questionnaires, assessments, like picture tasks, closed tests, and also some data on there. So if people kind of want to look at that. So because the people are involved are the same, so I don't work for IRIS, but the people are connected by people, we also have a link on the website. So if somebody wants, if there is IRIS material for us available for a summary, we'll always put a link in and people can go have a look. Yeah. But I mean, in practice, our audience is slightly different, because if you look at the IRIS audience, it's about 80% academics and students, they're mostly PhD students and master students. So there's a kind of slightly different audience there, but yeah, they are connected. So
yeah, so if you were wanting to find out about research papers, OASIS is the place to go. But if you actually decided to start doing your own research, then maybe IRIS would be a good place to find things.
Yeah, so I mean, having said that, if you read a summary about like a specific kind of assessment, say vocabulary assessment or something, and there's the iris link there, the test will be on iris. So you can go and have a look at the actual test. Like so that it's not useful for teachers. It is very useful, but it's in it. Yeah, it's and or if you kind of think, oh, I wonder if how they really did this thing with the pictures that they were talking about, you can go and have a look at it. It's but yeah, that's because it's a little bit more time consuming, but yeah, so slightly different audiences, but it could be interesting as well. It's not meant for researchers necessarily just, but it's used more by researchers, I think, Iris.
Okay, that's great. So then I guess the last thing that I wanted to ask you, and I think you've kind of answered this a little bit already, but that is, how can people get involved with OASIS if they're listening to this and thinking, wow, that sounds great, I want to do something. What can they do?
Well, okay, first of all, straightforward one, go to the website and have a browse, have a look at what we have. If you've ever thought like, oh, I wish I had more time for research, I wish I could find out a bit more about this, come and go and have a look. We're also on Twitter. We're at OASIS_database, and we'll just tweet out any new summaries and any news we might have. Probably a link to this as well when it comes out. And
no problem.
yeah, and we also have a newsletter, which is kind of a roundup of all the new summaries every month, with just links to. So you can sign up for that as well, and the sign up link is on our homepage and also on the top of our Twitter feed as well. So you do that. If you're a researcher and you think, oh, it sounds great, come and send us your research, send a summary of your work. One more, it's fine. Like, go and check the criteria on the help page and the guidelines and the annotated examples, and kind of write your summary and send it in to us. Yeah, and I would also like to say that we mostly have English summaries, but we'd really like to be a multilingual resource because we think that's important. And we've not really focused on it so far because we've been setting up, but eventually, and we're kind of starting to really think about this, we would like to be a multilingual resource. So you can send in your summaries in English, but you could also send in translations of them in other languages. They have to be translations at this point because otherwise we can't do quality assurance. Right. Because we don't have experts in Chinese, Japanese, French, Russian, Hindi. So at this point, they'd have to be translations, but we do accept those, and we would love those. We'd love to have some more of them because it's important, I think, for people to be able to access things in languages other than English as well. So yeah, I think that's ways you get involved. If you're running a course, a postgraduate course, and you think, oh, it sounds great to have coursework, kind of write an OASIS summary as coursework. It's a really good activity, actually, kind of putting in, like, translating something into kind of non-technical language and putting it in one page. It's a really kind of way of, you really have to understand the paper before you can do that. So it's a good exercise, but I think it's also really useful. It's nice for students to have their coursework be useful beyond just coursework. And of course, they get their name on it. So it's so if you think that would be something you'd like to do, again, go on the website or contact us, and we can talk about what's the best way of doing that. Yeah, I think those are all the ways you can get involved.
Okay. Yeah. Brilliant. So yeah. I will put some links for OASIS and the things we've talked about today. But yeah, thank you very much, Inge, for coming on to talk about OASIS.
Yeah, you're very welcome, and thank you for giving us the opportunity. It's been nice.
Okay.